Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to Social Confoes. I'm your host Diego, together with my co-host Jean-luc. Jean-luc, how's it been?
It's great. I think we made a commitment last week. You pulled through for our guest for today. And wow, okay. We have a big lineup planned for the next, I think, month of social conference, maybe even 2 months, maybe even 3 months. So
Yeah,
I'm
I'm still
really
sending a
excited.
few out.
I'm
So
really excited about the next coming weeks. But we get to kick it off with a brand new guest. And yeah, he and I have more in common than we like to acknowledge.
yeah, we were
Uh,
discussing who's gonna do the
yeah,
introduction, and like
yeah. So,
I met him for the first time a few months ago, actually in person. We've been connected for a while now, but then you came along like I know some stories. So tell us, what kind of stories do you got?
well, first of all, we know each other for longer than 10 years. And we don't even realize that it's been over 10 years already since you know each other. And we used to be colleagues. That's where it started. I came in as like a scrappy like intern. Being, I mean, I finished all my degrees and came back to Suriname, and I didn't know anything about web development and social media at the time. Well, I had a Facebook, I had Hives, I had High Five, but I didn't know anything from the business perspective. And he was already a web developer for quite some time, and we worked together a couple of years, and then he went on to bigger things because he made a commitment to himself that he was going to start a business as part of a larger organization. And I also decided to go into a larger organization and start my own business. So we do have that in common. What we also have in common is that we once organized tourism tours together. He used to have a bike trail in Comoena, and I think we can kick it off with that because I don't want to keep him waiting too long. He's one of the hardest working old colleagues of mine, and also somebody that I actually still work with till this day. And I'm actually gonna the last thing I'm gonna say, my mom brought out a book this weekend. She wrote her own book and she
Yeah,
built her own website, but also with the help of today's guest. Without further ado, Simon Noerdjan, welcome to Social Confoes.
Thank you, guys. Well,
Simon.
thank you. Thank you for being part of this exciting lineup that you guys are talking about. And
Yeah, you're
yeah,
kicking it off. No, seriously, you're kicking it off. We made a commitment last week that we decided, you know what, we want to take Social Confoes serious, but the most fun way to do it is with guests,
yeah,
and we're gonna do a lot of variety. We're gonna have guests from all over the world next coming months.
well,
So
that's
I think
nice.
Diego was, listen, before you do that, Jean-Luc, let's bring in a local. Let's bring in somebody, and he doesn't know that basically you host all my websites, and
Well,
and then
agree.
whenever there's something that is about web development, Simon is basically the first one that I go to. Him and Raul Brahim are the ones that I go to when it comes to web development.
Yeah,
And
Simon has been long overdue. I actually been behind Simon a few months now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And yeah, finally, I did have another meeting today, but I kind of called it off or did the other one earlier just to
yeah.
join this session and not reschedule it.
But let's start off with that actually, because you're part of a mastermind. Is that correct?
Uh, yeah, that's true. I'm part of an organization called Nagasari, which is, well, it started off as a mastermind group and then it grew out more into business empowerment because there are a lot of entrepreneurs these days. And one of the challenges is that we often need to talk about our challenges with other entrepreneurs and share knowledge with each other. And the solution to some of the problems are often very, very easy or but we just don't have it because we don't talk, right? So it's necessary for us entrepreneurs to talk to each other and learn from each other, and that's why I decided to join Nagasari, and we have a expo this weekend, which I encourage you guys to join, coming Friday and Saturday. So you're hereby invited,
What's the
and
location? What's the time?
we're
What's it
starting at
called?
6 p.m. The location is Mensa at Leesweg. And we'll be displaying some virtual reality applications. That's uh, something new for us to bring into the market. It's actually technology that has been existing for quite a few years, but we finally decided to add it to our portfolio also.
Interesting. So we got the promo part done of this episode. This weekend at Mensa, check out the expo with you're gonna meet a lot of entrepreneurs, and
Yeah.
Simon's gonna be there with some VR stuff. We're gonna
Yep.
talk more about VR a bit later, but let's go back a bit in time. As I was listening to Chanduk's story on you guys' trajectory, similar trajectory, started your own company as part of a larger group. You went deeper into web development.
Yeah.
So how did you go from like touring in Camaueno on bikes to web development?
Well, it has been web development first. It started off, I always say 17, but it's 18 now. 18 years ago, out of curiosity, uh, in my room, how do you create a website? And I started looking up tutorials and started developing websites. And I soon discovered that I could create something for people, for companies, and started doing small freelance job for customers. And it all went from there, doing freelance
What was
jobs.
your like first actual product like that went, out in public?
Um, I think it was I did a project for SecuLink. That was a company, an internet company back then.
Geez,
Yeah,
Seikulik, like that's like the OG of the internet in
yeah,
Suriname for people
yeah,
that don't know.
yeah, yeah. But when I come to think about it, if I compare what I did back then to what everyone's doing now, it's like a big difference in technology. We didn't have mobile browsers back then, so all was tied to a computer. But yeah, my personal vision is to continue growing, and it, from freelancing became working for a company, and then I grew from there. But the urge to start something for myself was always there. And then I started with Dynamics in 2012 together with another partner. Um, and we started off with small customers, well, kind of everything that came in just to pay the bills, right? And nowadays we have quite a large portfolio, and I'm very proud of what we've achieved in the past few years. Um, like being a brand known by like a great part of Suriname. And we're also doing projects outside of Suriname right now, which is more of our next step, something I want to do a lot more of.
You're actually, I think, like ahead of the curve when it comes to that, especially in our kind of industry, ICT related, and you've already been outside of Suriname to see like what's the market like outside of Suriname. What surprised you the most uh, compared to other markets compared to Suriname? What's something that you feel stands out?
Well, I think it's the e-commerce and payment methods. I really wish that we had that here. If we had that, like the way it is in the United States, for example, um, we would have been able to create a lot more creative applications, do a lot more of transactions, and surface as it is through the internet could be a lot better. Um, so in order to be able to work on that kind of technology, we were kind of required to get customers from outside. So we've developed a, a e-commerce platform which is pretty successful in French Guiana. They do food delivery, and they only do card transactions, no cash transactions, and they've been doing that since since the beginning, since they started for almost 3 years now. And it was a very interesting journey for us because uh, we didn't know anything about card payments for Europe, because French Guiana is like considered Europe. Um, we've implemented four of their major payment processors over there. And because we did that, we even got reference to do another job all the way in Africa, another part of France, which is called Mayotte. Small little island that I didn't even know of. It's like this tiny dot between the mainland of Africa and Madagascar. But they even have e-commerce and on that tiny dot somewhere in the ocean. And we did some implementations for payment processors over there also.
It sounds pretty close to the island of Suriname.
Why do you say that?
Oh, yeah, right. Is it the island of Suriname somewhere there,
uh,
or
Wait,
I'm
there's
not
an
am I
sure.
island.
confusing?
I'm not
There's an
familiar
island
with that,
Suriname?
but yeah.
Uh,
No, I'm
I
not
think
sure.
I'm confusing it with something else, but I'm pretty sure there is. No, but that's actually pretty cool to hear how that performed. But I think, how are you feeling like in the solutions? If you look at all the mobile payment
Mhm.
options that there have been for the past year,
Yeah,
talking about MoPay, but also Unified Pay, also RX Pay,
yeah.
different kind of companies trying. How close? What do we need to change to really move over to some sort of mobile payment system?
I think the mobile payment methods are great. They're doing a good job so far, and we've implemented them into websites, and um, they're working as they should. But well, where the problem lies, I think, is that the current generation here in Suriname is just not ready to go digital.
Be-
Um, I kind of have more hope in the next generation, or the one that is coming up, to go digital, but we might skip this one because
Before we go into the generation and going digital stuff, I wanna on a more macro perspective.
yeah,
Um, Basically, you had to learn without having touched it yourself, how these payment processors work. So
mhm,
I'm looking at the United States, Europe. You have the Mastercard Visa network.
yeah,
It's a very large network of payments, and that makes it possible for a lot of countries, companies to do these mass transactions cross border even.
yeah.
So how close are we, or how relevant is it that we integrate into that network versus developing or allowing our own networks to be created or provided by local providers?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it's good that our local providers are developing their solution. But even if we did integrate into bigger networks, it would be only beneficial for like a small portion of the economy. And for it to be very beneficial for everyone, I think a lot more people need to adapt to having like a bank account first, being able to have good access to internet and on their mobile phone, and like adapt to the culture of like doing transaction on their phone. Like nowadays, we have companies paying out their employees like through the phone, right? Using internet banking and all that available, but it's like a small portion, and there's still a lot of people using cash. We've ventured into a online shop a few years ago during COVID. We started shop online, and like 80% of all the transactions were cash, and we had to accept it because like we needed to get the business
So it was
going.
like cash upon delivery, cash upon
Yeah,
delivery, cash
But
upon.
and it,
on that note, is that because there is kind of like because the infrastructure is not in place, people are doing cash, so it's kind of a chicken and egg situation here. Like,
yeah,
uh, that's how I see it. Because if that option was available, that people could actually check out online here, I do believe that the generation like the 30, 25 and younger at least
mhm,
would opt in for that, right? And just for comparison, you
mhm,
mentioned you guys integrated a payment processor for this island in Africa. So
yeah.
is it were they part of a larger infrastructure, or did they or do they have a localized infrastructure in place that people can actually use
Yeah.
locally even?
It was part of a larger infrastructure. They had actually, I'm not sure what it's called, but like their bank was actually based in France, so they're connected to that infrastructure.
Got it. Yeah, you get
Yeah,
the benefits from
yeah,
the.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
so Diego,
actually,
this is another interesting topic which we won't talk discuss on too much, but
yeah,
it's interesting how well like the English and the French have taken care of their colonies when it comes to these kind of systems and passports and those kind of things that really help you out to be connected with the Western world. But good, that's
exactly.
another topic.
That's another
Uh,
discussion indeed.
that's a
I agree.
totally
Yeah.
different discussion. So quickly to jump in on, I have a question as well, but Donovan mentioned something interesting here. Digital
Mhm.
payment will improve once all the payment possibilities are easy to acquire. So for the next generation, like, um, what's the easiest way to make this process go smoothly? Is it mobile payments? Do you think we have a better chance with mobile payments than with getting people to allow them to have bank accounts at the age of 16, for instance?
I think both. I think uh, how do you say that? If you have a bank account, it seems like you have something more solid. But if you have your phone connected to it in some kind of way, it makes it just easier to use. So I think you have to go with both solutions at
You need
once.
a practical one, like your
Yeah,
phone, easy payments,
yeah,
quick, but also
yeah,
like legitimizing it through through
exactly.
through actually a bank account.
And I think
Okay, so
the earlier you do it, uh, the faster people adapt to it and will use it a lot more also.
Speaking of culture, and not only have you provided services, projects for clients outside, you've also visited several regions around the world. You've been
Hmm.
to, if I'm not mistaken, Singapore, and recently when I actually met you in person, we went to the wildlife program together. So
That's true.
can you tell us a bit about like kind of what was the culture like in in the east, a country like Singapore in the east Asia, versus your experience in the west like US, and then
Yeah.
bringing that back home, like how has that opened your perspectives or thought process on providing solutions?
Well, first of all, when I went to Singapore, I worked on a virtual reality application for a huge school. It's called the ITE College, where they had this massive room with 3D projectors, where nowadays we just use the Meta Quest. But the one thing that I think that I realized is that we have the skills, the knowledge to be able to provide solutions all over the world, right? And I worked on a software platform over there, which I didn't even know, and it was just about programming. I think once you know how to program, you can program like any language because it's like the same logic. But the other interesting part is that in Singapore, everything was so fast paced. Like people were moving at a fast pace on a massive scale every day. but at the same time, like they are collecting data on the same speed. And I keep talking about this example where I had this card, this key card, which you could top up also with credits, money. And then I used that card to lock my hotel room, open the elevator, go onto the train, check into the bus, and open up my office. But if you come to think about it, like they can track every movement you make throughout the day because you're using that one card to tap in everything. And I could even buy a snack at the train station with it. So that's how massive.
So basically, you can purchase a snack at the train station with your room key.
Yeah, yeah, they had everything programmed on it. And that was like mind blowing for me at the first time. And just uh, at that moment, I had 100 megabytes per second on my mobile phone. Right, so I was like sitting on a bus and giving people virtual tours back home.
Like
That
a true Asian, like a true Asian.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
your experience in being a guide for tour, came handy.
yeah. I was often called a Filipino over there, but I was like, no, I'm from Suriname. And I was, do you mean Sudan? Like, no, Suriname. That's all the way in South America. Like people, a lot of people over there don't know us, right? They never heard about Suriname. And even when I checked into Malaysia, they saw my passport and they like, we don't know this passport. And they opened it up and scanned it and like, okay, yeah, okay, you're from a real
It
country.
works. It works.
It works. Yeah,
So let's jump into, because I find this also, and it's a mind tease. So you just mentioned that with one card you can basically do everything, like open
yeah,
your room, but also uh, pay for something at the train station. So when we were talking about the cash upon delivery thing, like one of the things that's really weird with this culture, there's a lot of trust involved
yeah,
with Surinamese vendors.
yeah.
So we take the risk of, and it's been like that everywhere in the world in the past.
Mhm.
But we take the risk of actually making a package, creating a product, bring it to somebody's home, and doing all the work up front, like
Yeah,
all the costs up front, and that person at the door paying for it.
or
Which,
not.
of course, there could be a situation where the person at the door says, like, yeah, I didn't order this. And then you're just standing there and you're like, wait a minute, or the order is incorrect. And then you have to reimburse your client because you gave an incorrect order. Now, one of the best things, like for a business to have with digital payment, is basically you pay first.
Mhm. That's
So
correct.
the risk is more on the client side than the business side. So, how much is that playing a role in whether or not people in Suriname would still rather prefer cash because they feel like they're more psychologically, they're more in control of the purchase?
Hmm. Well, could you repeat the last part, please?
So how much does that take into account when you're thinking of, like, there is a low adaption, like people
Hmm.
are not used to online payments?
Yeah,
And I'm seeing this with myself.
yeah,
Anytime I, except for crypto, if it's crypto, I make the payment easily. It's like, yeah, sure, I'll pay for that. But when it comes to like cash from my actual bank account, whenever I have to make an online payment, I'm like much more hesitant, and I want to double check, triple check, just to make sure that there's nothing that could go wrong. But still, I'm hesitant towards using online payments.
yeah.
And how much psychologically this does this kind of play a role for why people prefer to do cash payments instead of um, prepaying
Yeah.
online or mobile payment?
Yeah. Well, I think uh, first of all, looking at the entrepreneurial part of it, like just being in Suriname, you have to uh, be prepared that you have to fight certain battles to get things done, right? So we do this knowing that there are risks involved, and we're just willing to take it because, like, you either do it and gain something, or don't do it and gain nothing. And that's from the entrepreneurial part. But what you're
And you're
saying, like,
stuck.
if if I see it with myself, like when I do credit card payments, right? It's a lot easier, and I tend to approve faster, and you don't overthink making a purchase, and that's actually what I experienced from it.
If I can add, I think it's about friction, because like what we have now, when you mentioned making a payment on Jean-luc, I'm thinking about making a bank transfer.
Hmm.
You have to input
Yep,
the bank account number, payee, and there's different types of banks, etc.
exactly.
You could make a mistake, it goes to the wrong account, and then you
Yeah.
gotta call support, and then that's another few weeks or a few days going past by. So people kind of want to avoid that headache, which adds a layer of friction, I feel.
Hmm.
No, but
um,
also bigger payments. I think it's also bigger payments now that I come to think of it.
yeah, and bigger payments obviously make sense. I think if you come back in Simon's example of a credit card, because the credit card we use are either on a Visa or Mastercard network. Obviously, they're connected to one of the local banks also,
Yep,
but you kind of have some kind of coverage or insurance by these networks that if
hmm,
something goes wrong with the merchant,
yeah,
you can file in a report or something, and that gets resolved systematically. So, and
exactly.
that removes friction or headache by the consumer.
Yeah,
So when I'm thinking about these payment solutions, it's about removing friction from the different layers to not even think about it. Nowadays, we just swipe.
yeah,
For people who have cards, actually, but yeah,
yeah.
but
That's
for
that's the
people who haven't
reality.
Well,
experienced it,
actually, you put in a chip. For some reason, like in a lot of countries, they moved away from the swipe and are all using the chip now. It's like
yeah,
Yeah,
insane.
actually,
Even
the,
with
the
credit
US
cards.
was behind this trend. The US was less secure because they were swiping all the things. Europe was more secure with the chip model. Not sure
yeah,
about Asia, where Asia was at that time, but that's what
Well,
I've
Asia
been
just
able to
has
observe.
one card for everything, I guess. So they're way ahead of us. Like also with, I don't know how much you guys have experienced, have experimented with WeChat, for instance. Like
no, I
how
haven't.
easy it is to pay with WeChat. Of course, a lot of functionalities don't work outside of China. But like Surinamese students in China are like, guys, WeChat it's insane. I can do everything with my phone. And like I feel behind with my friends in the Netherlands when we go out to drink because they split the bill in the restaurant, and
Tiki,
I
name it Tiki.
always, yeah, yeah, we have that option. Like Mope has that option. We haven't just normalized it, I guess, as well. And I think also with the currency, um, with the inflation being high, there's like you have to put a lot of money on your phone,
Yeah.
and that's also something that you have to get used to, similar to a lot of money in your wallet. So I think the size of the payment also so plays a psychological role, I guess.
Well, come to think about it, Diego was totally right. Like removing friction would make stuff a lot easier for us. Like I would not go to Atfat and have a drink, and especially top up my wallet just to pay, right? Like instead of that, I would just walk to an ATM and take some cash out, and because topping up the wallet takes uh, a few hours if you're like a local account Mopay owner, Haken Bank account owner. So instead of that, you just go to ATM and get cash and have it and just pay it out and you're done with it, right?
Yeah.
Like, we don't prepare stuff
But
like
actually,
I,
so here's
uh-huh.
okay, here's the weird thing. So I quickly want to talk about this because I think this could be helpful for others. Because Yuran mentions like, yeah, of course, listen, guys, um, you can just do it with Hakan Bank online payment. and the only reason to top up Unify Pay is to pay for utilities because you don't want to be in the line. But let's get into your scenario, Simon.
Mhm.
So if we have get a drink, we go out, we have a drink, for
Yeah,
instance, like we go to the ATM
yeah,
and we get cash, or we pay. Luckily, most places where you go now, you can pay with your debit card,
yeah. That's
so
true.
that's already a big improvement. But then, if we go to the ATM, why do we go to the ATM just to get cash out of it, but not to put more uh, to charge your wallet with some cash as well at the same time?
Because
Why aren't we
like
doing that? Like,
I'm not doing
I
that
think
because
the adoption is just a little bit too low at the moment.
yeah, but
Yeah.
like I'm doing that
No, go
because
ahead.
I'm not
I'm curious
sure.
why you're not
I'm not
doing it.
sure how
I'm
quick
gonna
and
tell you
how
why I'm
fast.
not gonna do it, and you're gonna laugh.
I'm not sure how quick and how fast it's going to be on my wallet yet. Be an hour or be less, but when you go and take out cash, you know you have it, right? And you can just
You can spend it.
you can spend it afterwards. Um, and that's why uh, I would do that. And even if I have my card, I choose to have like some cash with me in case the card fails due
Yeah,
to a network correct connection or something.
yeah.
Yeah,
Or just some silly restaurant that just doesn't have debit card payment options available, that you have to pay cash only. That actually happened with
of
me
course.
this past week or last weekend as well. But okay, for me personally, and this is going to be a very terrible answer, the main reason I don't top up is because I don't have enough space on my phone. I have to clean up my phones, both of my phones.
You just buy a new phone for it, just for the
It's the
wallet.
worst possible answer.
Yeah, I think that's
No,
more
it's
of
the
a.
worst possible answer. I know, but that's the main
Yeah,
reason.
No, but coming back to payments, I know.
I just realized that I really need to get a new phone.
Yeah, but just coming back to payments to just wrap up this section on payment processors. Like I know in a lot of African countries, they use mobile payments and it's really dumbed down phones because
yeah,
they created their own local infrastructure.
yeah,
So I don't think it's necessarily about, um, you know, being part of a bigger infrastructure, bigger network. It's about that reaching that critical mass of, mass adoption and removing that friction. So you need to make it as accessible as possible for people that what's the standard phone that the average person has now, right?
yeah.
Um, I think in Africa they even use it through SMS or something uh, back in the day.
Yeah, but that plan failed because we had that like 8 9 years ago. We actually
Yeah.
had already had the option. I think a couple of companies or a couple of people developed it during hackathons that you were able to
We
pay
actually did that.
with SMS. Yeah, I remember that. So
Yeah, we did
that's
that.
the thing. And what happened was, I think the main reason it didn't go through is because the central bank has to approve that, and the central bank of Suriname didn't approve SMS transactions because it was like you're printing digital money with
Yeah,
You're
with
creating
a
credit.
you're creating, yeah, you're creating a new currency, technically speaking.
yeah,
So they didn't approve of that. It died down. Now there's digital mobile payments, but I do feel like indeed, like if the next generation is gonna be, it's for them it's so easy. Like my children are probably not gonna walk around with cash
yeah.
ever. I'm not sure they're gonna even have a
True.
wallet.
That's
They'll
what I'm
they'll have a
saying.
wallet of some sort, but it's not the traditional wallet. Their phone basically is going to be their wallet. And I think that's one of the things that we're currently a little bit behind. But I do feel like the options are getting more.
Yeah, they are. But at the same time, like you just don't wait to do stuff when you're an entrepreneur. Like you have to make stuff
Yeah.
happen. And if people want to pay cash, you just go for it,
You
right?
accept it. Yeah.
Yeah, Yeah,
you make sure you have all the options
yeah. You
and,
have
and try.
to. At the
But
end of the day, you have to like sell, and that's why you just have to adapt to the situation. And like for some of us, like we don't have like some of the entrepreneurs don't have a lot of leverage to change stuff. It might take a few years before we reach that stage where everyone, where banking gets more accessible and payment methods get more accessible and people are more willing. But at the same time, y- the business shouldn't stand still. So
It depends on the kind of business, right? Like,
yeah, that too, that also.
yeah, like
uh,
my wife goes to Go Chapeau, and you basically
Mhm.
have to pay with Mopay there. Like for instance, he just
Okay.
made it mandatory. So
yeah,
which is I mean it's cool. It's
no,
possible.
but
If you look
it,
at like putting up, like for instance, let if we're putting up a Surinamese version
Mhm.
of OnlyFans or Patreon, we would basically we could just use the mobile payments because the people who would be purchasing would be familiar with that method or would be interested enough to do
Yeah.
so. So I do think there are a couple of
in that
cuts that
example you mentioned, for example, Go Chapo, it's kind of brand leverage there because there's a certain type of
Yeah.
group that goes there, and
yeah.
you can leverage that brand to,
Yeah.
encourage adoption. So that's another way to encourage adoption. But speaking of, to transition to a bit more adaptability, flexibility, you're trying out new things. Earlier in the episode, you mentioned, you're looking into VR. You guys are going to demo this on the weekend too. During your
Yeah.
time in Singapore, you've actually dabbled in that tech yourself.
Mhm.
So, what is it about VR particularly that piqued your interest? And while I do see, even in the world, still pretty early,
Mhm.
why is it grabbing your attention, and how can we leverage that to our benefit?
Yeah. Well, I experienced it firsthand in Singapore back then, where I developed applications, training applications for the students over there. And to give you an idea, the school over there is like massive. Like one school has like 10,000 students, and one class, like 60 students. And they're teaching subjects like, uh, how do you call this? Aviation maintenance, and at some point it becomes impossible to have 60 students around this airplane doing maintenance training, and which could be dangerous. Like to give them the first hand experience of the environment, um, they designed this virtual reality application where they could see and experience everything without the real dangers involved first, so they can learn better. And it's kind of surprising because when you look at like an object falling, uh, you really get the reaction from people, like the real reaction from an object falling, instead of reading into a book, hey, it can be dangerous if a wrench comes falling down. Like you really see something falling at you, and you react with like
So,
um, your whole body. And
so
when,
what I'm hearing there, instead of reading a book or watching a video on YouTube,
yeah,
VR actually triggers like emotional response or
exactly,
um,
exactly. They
within
call
the
it,
body, like a psychological response
yeah,
that you would experience in
yeah,
real life,
yeah. It's
and that's missing, right?
they use virtual reality to implement immersive learning, and like to trigger all kind of responses. And we had fun developing those applications back then. Like we would design buildings 40 stories high and jump from it. And when you fall down, you really get that feeling in your legs where like uh, having your knees come to your shoulder and stuff. And in other cases, you would mess with gravity and then you would fall in slow motion. And it was kind of fun. But at the same time, I think it's
Uh,
a useful
Simon, there's
technology.
a light crackling in your mic. Oh, I just stopped. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry,
Oh,
go ahead.
okay. Yeah, at the same time, I think it's a very useful technology to be used in companies for induction training, on-the-job training, having people see an oil rig from up close before going over there first. So it can be very useful. You can eliminate a lot of danger before having people go into the real world and mess up themselves, more importantly. And
It's
there is,
it's really interesting. Yeah.
yeah. So we have, right now we have one young student who just graduated, and he's our first developer who's developing on the MetaQuest platform. But there are tons of the, platforms on which you can develop, but they all work on the same principle, more or less.
Like, how would you describe the development curve in creating these virtual realities? Like in your example, for an oil rig example,
Mhm.
obviously, this is something these corporations are interested in. There are models placed. But for example, the student you got with you, like, what's the learning curve or entry difficulty entry curve for people to grasp and build these spaces.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, from a developer's perspective.
Yeah. First of all, he studied software development and did PHP building web applications. So that was his. Um, uh, he already knew how to do that. So he was a programmer, or he is a programmer. And then we did the training, and just after 1 month, he was able to develop VR applications. So like the stages of development is like basically the same when you develop a normal application. We go into a design process, we just map it out on paper, and then you have to design the 3D models. Luckily, the internet has a lot of resources where you can pay, some are for free, where you could like download a whole house, other objects, and once you've positioned it, you can actually go and program interactions with all of those objects. And so it's basically like developing a game, but
So I'm just
only,
curious.
yeah.
Just curious. Have you already designed an infinite loop?
No, not yet, not yet. But we're joking around at work sometimes, and I'm asking him like, "Where are you now? Are you in the real world or are you in virtual reality?" And he says, "I'm not sure."
You should get a token to make sure, like
Yeah,
knowing
yeah,
what the difference between real and fake is. No, just kidding. But from a because of virtual reality is a lot of there are a lot of use cases,
yeah. There are.
like there are, and you already mentioned a couple. So if you look at back, one you specifically that you mentioned already is training sessions,
Yeah,
just things that are in real life or quite dangerous that you can simulate through a VR. Kind of similar how pilots train. Basically, they have pilots have a training as well where it's a simulation. It's not necessarily, maybe now it's even a VR simulation. While it's even bigger
yeah.
because they have like cockpits with like a simulation for a specific aircraft. But aside from simulation, do you feel like there's also already some commercial potential for VR? And what kind of commercial potential would be like a low barrier kind of thing?
Well, yeah. First of all, when you go on to the MetaQuest platform, there are a lot of video games over there, and I think that on itself is pretty much commercial. But I've looked a little bit into the metaverse. Like I said in the beginning, I'm really at the gates peeking in. But you really have companies designing their virtual reality offices. I've seen that in companies in the US. And there are massive discussions happening like, should we move offices into the metaverse? Should we interact with customers in the metaverse? Should we do transactions in the metaverse? And there are discussions about privacy, like how would the customer show up in the metaverse and identify that it's actually him? Like you would come in your avatar where you're maybe a lion or something, and how would I identify that it's actually Simon sitting on the other side of the desk trying to open a bank account, right? And
Yeah.
they have events happening like on a daily basis over there. I was placed in Charlotte, and we were at uh, a conference the first day I got there, and it was about the metaverse, and they said like it has a potential of being a $800 billion business, right? And I think if a lot of big companies project it's just they're just going to make it happen, and I'm sure it's going to be a big business. Um, for us, I'm not sure yet, but uh, I'm kind of looking forward to it. Like we're
Well,
already into virtual reality.
I see an opportunity just to interject real quick,
Yeah,
going back to the tour guide times, like VR nature tours or something like that. That's just a wild idea.
It's
That's
not
yeah,
safe. It's not safe to bike in Suriname, but it is safe to do it in the metaverse. And
yeah.
then you have the big dump trucks going like past you, and then you make it into a game. No, just kidding. I think I have one more question.
Yeah.
Shamil also has a question in the comments
Mhm.
before I ask that question, and that's more about are there built-in safety measures to overcome dangers in VR simulation? And for instance, how long can you stay in such a state without restraining yourself?
Well, to be honest, I'm not sure, but there are definitely a lot of some safety measures which we've also encountered while developing. First of all, when you go on to the put on your Meta headset, you have to define your boundaries because the other day I almost smashed one of our monitors while playing a game. But because I made the boundary a bit bigger than it should be, and I didn't take into account that there was a monitor over there, and I actually hit it with my what do you call it? With one of those controllers.
Controllers, yeah.
Yeah, that are one of those safety measures. And while developing, uh, like the way you move around, um, we created this virtual office that we will be displaying. But in certain ways, when moving around, you get motion sickness. So um, just to play it safe and not have a lot of people during the expo experience too much motion sickness, uh, instead of walking around the office in the virtual office, we decided to teleport into into spaces. Like if I want to go two-step further, I just teleport two-step further instead of moving, because in your brain, um, you're moving but standing still at the same time, and that's creating some kind of that's messing with your head, and you
Yeah,
don't
you
want
have
to do that.
to fake walk
Yeah,
to
yeah,
get some.
yeah.
Okay,
But
okay,
if
clear.
you're used to it, you don't get it as quick, or you don't even get it at all. But take into account that you might have visitors that will be experiencing it for the first time. We just altered the movement into teleporting into places, so we don't want people falling down at the expo just from walking around just to play it safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before we head into over unders and our final questions, the costs. This is one of the things. So like say for instance you build like you have to build
Mhm.
the space.
Yeah.
Um, how expensive is it if you look at the time and resources that you have to put in? Because I think that's one of the biggest worries.
Mhm.
I was at High Fest last year, which was a virtual edition,
Mhm.
and there were some limitations to the space. Like for instance, I think there was a maximum of 100 or 50, 150, 200 people that could be in one space, and like the similar event was kind of copied in on another virtual space as well. So not necessarily the limitations, but is it already at a phase where it's something that it's mainstream, or is it like no, we're still, especially from a development and resources perspective, it will some take some time to get there.
Well, I think it will take some time to get there because first of all, the goggles they go for about $300, and like we don't expect that every household or every kid has one, or but that's why we're pretty much specific about our target group. We're targeting companies who want to use this for a specific purpose, and so they can allocate a budget for it. Like to start developing for it is not very expensive, but the time that put into it, like designing the environment, the designing the interactions, actually programming the interactions, testing it out, uh, that can take a lot of time. That may cost a lot, but like the technology back then, just to give you an indication, when we had those virtual reality rooms, it was like um, a room of 4 by 4 meters, and they had four projectors, and with these massive servers, image processors or stuff. Like the investment was like around $900,000, right? And right now it's like $300. So it became very much cheaper to be able to experience this and to implement this. And I think more companies would be willing to implement it just because it's not so expensive as back then. And on the development side, it's pretty much open. Just like web development, there's a lot of knowledge to be found out there. Um, you can what we're doing is like we're doing online training. We're buying those online training programs, and at the same time, um, you have to. You don't. They're not that expensive because like the technology is evolving so quick. Like after a few months, we might have another. We might have to do another training program again. So it's constantly on the move, but the basic principle is still the same.
Yeah, to add quickly to that, I think your example of the $900,000 space 4 by 4. It's
Yeah.
also about fidelity, right? Like how immersed do you want to be? Because then you have so many sensors, you have so many dimensions.
Yeah.
Whereas the little goggle, the Quest, it's kind of you're confined. Yes, you're confined in a space as well,
Yeah.
but it has been scaled down to a certain degree,
Yeah.
and there are different levels of fidelity. Same with
Yeah.
game design, for example. You have the pixel games, and then you have the ultra almost realistic games, right? And
Mhm.
that has a huge parity in cost.
Mhm.
But before we go into over under, Jean-Luc mentioned, he went to High Fest, but then that was, yes, you could join through VR goggles, but you can also join through, a desktop, a screen, or on your phone. So how would you distinguish that? Is that VR, you having control over an avatar in space, or is it that immersion that's actually VR and getting that feeling of triggering those reactions, bodily reactions?
Yeah. I would say it's the more the immersion part. Like when you put on those goggles and go into that space, like you really feel like you're somewhere else. And also the case with the training programs that we're developing. Like you really get the feeling of an object
Yeah, I
trying
was
to
just
hit you in
feeling
the
like I
head.
was playing a 2D game, but
Yeah,
then I could interact with with the people. So
exactly.
I didn't feel fully immersed. So I
Yeah.
have to agree with that.
So on a desktop, you would see something falling. Like, okay, something's falling. But
Yeah.
when you're in it, um, you're reacting as if something is really falling on your head. right? And talking about fidelity, in my experience back then, I find the MetaQuest to be more immersive compared to the projectors back then because except for
How
the
many years
3D,
difference is this, like in
we're
development
talking
cycle?
about 2014, 8 years difference.
Hmm. Okay.
But you still had to put on those 3D goggles, and in some cases you might have like light shining in from the end. So um, in when you put on those MetaQuest goggles, it's a bit more uh, less more noise from the outside coming in, light coming in from the outside. So I had a better experience with the MetaQuest goggles.
All right. Fair point.
Yeah.
We are gonna experience that this weekend too. Don't forget. But yeah, Jean-luc, let's go to over unders. Looking at the time, you can do two quick ones each.
So yeah, two
Why don't
votes.
you kick us
So
off?
Simon is just the usual overrated, underrated, Gary Vaynerchuk style, but you're free to answer more and go more into depth, whether if you like the topic or not. I'm gonna keep it simple. Overrated or underrated? WordPress.
Underrated.
Digital fashion
Not sure. Sorry
in the
to answer
context
that.
of VR, in the VR, like
Uh, Not sure about that one yet.
fair point.
Okay. Facebook's purchase, acquisition of Oculus.
Do I say it's
Basic,
underrated?
basically, Meta Quest is Oculus, right? Or am
The
I
Meta
Yeah,
Quest
confusing
is
it?
yeah,
the Oculus, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, right. Okay.
yeah. Oculus became MetaQuest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a good purchase.
I have no idea how much it went for. Let me
Not
quickly
sure.
look at. Let me look at the acquisition overview
Okay,
for
while
Meta.
he looks
Yeah.
that up, I have a last one for you. Unreal Engine 5.
Uh, sorry, I can't answer that one. Like, one other thing about this new development is also that taking a few step backs from real development and uh, making myself available else, facilitating my programmers and having them do the job. Like this is my first
Okay, I'm,
like
I'm gonna rephrase that one.
uh,
Instead of the platform Unreal Engine 5,
uh,
um, game design.
uh,
Is game design underrated or overrated?
I think it's underrated because there's a lot that goes into it and that we might not take into account. I think it's there's a lot of effort that goes into it. Same when we're developing virtual reality applications, we kind of feel or sense what maybe real big game developers uh, go about. So I think it's underrated.
Okay. Let's put in perspective.
Hmm.
So in 2012, Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion,
Yeah.
and then in
That's 9 zeros.
2014, yeah, that's nine zeros. And then in 2014, February, they purchased WhatsApp for 19 billion,
Hmm.
19 billion. And then a month later, after WhatsApp, they purchased Oculus VR for 2 billion.
Yeah.
So the WhatsApp acquisition was about 10 times more than the Oculus
Yeah.
acquisition.
Yeah. And the Oculus acquisition was twice the price of Instagram.
Maybe it's the state of the market it was in, the state of the market back then. when they bought it.
I thought 2 billion was a lot at that time,
Right, but
but looking back at it now,
looking at it now with the metaverse, like they projected to be worth 800 billion. I think it was underrated. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I think so as
So I
well.
think if Oculus timed it better, they could have gotten more out of it.
They got definitely could have gotten more out of it. Interesting.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's it for the over unders. Simon, appreciated you coming on. Finally having you on, talk about your experience and
Yeah.
about VR. Very excited about the technological developments and also the your experience in payment processing. And hopefully within the next few years, we can get more of that critical mass adoption to be able to yeah transact more with less friction.
Yeah. So yeah, I think if we can't have those options here, we might go to somewhere else and develop solutions there, right? So
Yeah,
that's
this
how
is
I see
this
it
this
also.
is this is becoming a trend, Diego. Unfortunately, but businesses are also looking for opportunities outside now
Yeah.
because of the amount of opportunities there are outside. Um,
No, agreed. That's a very fair point.
yeah.
Yeah. But I'm not
So
planning to leave.
no, I saw. I we all saw. What's it? A picture or a painting behind you?
Well, it's actually my curtain.
It's your curtain.
Yeah.
Okay, you
So
fooled
that's
me.
nature, and I love the jungle, and
Yeah.
that's just why
So
I love this
leaving,
country.
straight up leaving the most forested country in the world isn't a real scenario at the moment.
But providing solutions headquartered here to
Uh-huh.
outside is definitely
On
Yeah,
the agenda.
interesting.
yeah,
Awesome.
that's it.
So Simon, where can people reach out to you if they're interested, if they heard something here that they would like more information about, if they want to be in touch with you, what's the best way to connect?
You can just send me an email, info@bitdynamics.sr, and you can also look us up on Facebook, Instagram, bitdynamics, and you'll find us there. Just send me a message, send us the message, and we'll get back at you.
There you have it, folks. With that being said, we will be back next week with our lineup. Episodes are being populated on the website. Jean-Luc, it's getting there, and I am excited. With that being said, Jean-Luc, roll us out.
This was Social Confoes. Thank you so much, Simon, for being our guest. Diego, it was a pleasure. And we will be back next week, same day, different time. See you back next week. Bye bye.